Welcome to People Helping People, the podcast to help social entrepreneurs build a stronger business and have a greater impact. Today, I'm excited to introduce our guest, Hannah von Nichol, who is the founder and CEO of Main Impact, an agency on a mission to amplify the voices of brands making a positive difference in the world. Hannah has experience spanning retail brands, tech startups, nonprofits, and beyond, specializing in helping values-driven organizations move people from awareness to action through strategic marketing and authentic storytelling. So, Hannah, welcome on the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Adam. Excited to have the conversation.
Yeah. And I would love to hear just a little bit of your journey. Like, how did you get started in a way that led to starting Main Impact?
Yeah, I think probably a lot of entrepreneurs can relate. My journey into business ownership has not been linear. It's always a fun conversation when I ask people how did you get into your business? Because everybody's journey is so different, and mine is no different in that sense. So my background actually, my undergrad is in Spanish and French education. I initially thought that I was going to teach. And then when I was at my university, I took part in a mission trip and went to San Francisco and worked with an organization there. We were helping to provide some services to the homeless population in San Francisco, and some different relief for them. And while I was there, a lot of things kind of shifted for me. I remember it was either New Year's Eve or New Year's Day. I remember calling my parents. It was a year before I was supposed to graduate. And I called my parents and I told them, hey, big news. Hey, I'm changing my major. I'm changing my career. This career that I've been planning since kindergarten for myself, that's all out the window. I'm going on a different trajectory. It was a really big kind of shock for everybody. I had to let the dust settle. I didn't entirely know what I wanted to do. I just knew that I wanted to make a difference and needed to kind of shift the path that I had been on. So I, right out of college, started freelancing. While I was working also as a full-time nanny, started taking on design clients, website clients, did a lot of self-teaching. Went back to school to study user experience, front-end development, and incorporated that into my work. And pretty quickly, as I was working with brands and different organizations in various industries, I noticed a gap that there was there's a lack of cohesion between the brand, the website, and the marketing. A lot of it was very piecemeal. And I saw an opportunity because, when you have this mission, this impact you're trying to make, you really need to amplify it, and you need to make sure that all of those pieces are interconnected in a way that's actually going to grow the entire organization. So I really shifted what I was doing, focusing more on the website side, the branding side, and started shifting the focus there on how can all of these pieces work together in order to amplify impact and amplify awareness and the connection that these organizations were having with their audience.
Well, and that's really great. I love that point where it's you realize, hey, no, actually, I want to spend my time making more of an impact. And then saying, hey, I've got to shift direction. I don't know what that is, but I'm going to start over here, build something up and see where that takes me. How do you incorporate working with value-driven companies, and what does that mean to you?
Yeah, for me, a lot of it started just from my personal values. Like I mentioned, I knew I wanted to make a difference. And when you're 20 years old, who knows what they want to do with their life, right? I sure didn't. But I knew that the work that I was doing needed to be impactful and needed to be meaningful. And I really wanted to utilize the skill set that I had. So a lot of it kind of just flowed naturally for me. I knew that I thought that I wanted to work just with nonprofits or work for a nonprofit. Various things kind of fell in and out of place. So it kind of launched me into the trajectory of starting my own business and still working with nonprofits, but also working with for-profits as well. And a lot of kind of what launched it is I have this really deep conviction that any organization, any business can be a force for good. I knew that I wanted that to not just be something I was living out personally, but I wanted to be able to have values-driven, purpose-driven brands to see greater growth and greater change.
Well, that's fantastic. I find this very relatable because I work with a lot of social entrepreneurs where they come and they say, hey, I need marketing. And it's well, what does that mean? And kind of their eyes glaze over because it's well, I think that means I have to post more on social media, right? Which is kind of a very when you've never done anything in marketing before, you don't know how to approach it. So, from an expert, what does marketing actually mean for a purpose-driven company?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I love that you brought that up because I think the question that you just posed is probably the question I get asked the most, right? I know I need marketing. I know I need to post on social media and I should have an email list, whatever it is. But really the big challenge that I see is there's a lack of clarity, right? So what does that mean? If digital marketing and just marketing in general is so broad, what should an organization be focusing on? And while a lot of the principles and the tactics of marketing are the same across the board, really a lot of it just comes down to strategy, to research. I always recommend that if you are going to start with any sort of marketing strategy, you have to understand where is your audience, what are your business goals, your organization goals, and use that to actually craft your marketing strategy because there's such a broad range of marketing tactics. It's not worth just throwing spaghetti at the wall, right? Like you want to make sure that you are spending your time, your money, your resources in the right places. So what is marketing strategy? It's making sure that you are spending your time and your resources in the right areas that actually see growth for your organization. And that's going to look different for everybody.
It's a bit like sports. If you say, hey, I want to be, great at sports, and so therefore I need to work out, let's go to the gym. That's not useful if you want to be a dancer or a downhill skier.
Yeah, there are different muscles you're going to have to work. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. That makes a lot of sense. I'm curious about this between like nonprofits and for-profits. Do you see a difference in like how they approach marketing and what their needs are?
There definitely is a difference in how they approach it, even though it may be a controversial statement. I don't necessarily think there should be a difference. I think a lot of nonprofits, when they're kind of asking these questions about, well, what marketing do I need to be doing? Really, they need to be doing the same kind of marketing to an extent that for-profits are doing, right? They still need to be in communication with their audience. And even though they're not selling a product in the same way that a for-profit is, but they are trying to establish trust and credibility with a donor base, right? So really, they shouldn't necessarily approach it differently. I think there's a lot more alignment between nonprofits and social enterprise businesses, right? So those are for-profit organizations that kind of have a similar lens as a nonprofit. And so for nonprofits specifically, it's going to look like, how do you make sure that the marketing you're doing is aligning with your vision, with your values, and speaking to your audience and really capturing the heart of the message for them?
What are some of the big challenges that purpose-driven companies face when approaching marketing?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest thing is confusing kind of how I differentiate marketing tactics from marketing strategy. You have, social media is a marketing tactic. Email newsletters are a marketing tactic. Google ads are a marketing tactic. But if they're not working in tandem in some sort of overall strategy, there's going to be a disconnect in a lot of ways. So you're probably going to have either lower growth or lower brand visibility. A lot of times I think organizations don't understand how all those pieces play together, and they almost like Frankenstein their marketing, right? Like they're just kind of putting all these things together, hoping it all kind of comes together in a way that works for their organization instead of actually thinking, what is the overall purpose of our organization? How does that lean into the marketing? How can we use marketing to publicize that essentially? So they're coming at it from more of a piecemeal approach instead of a cohesive strategy.
For somebody who's a budding social entrepreneur who's starting out and they are in very early revenue stages, they can't outsource these things. How should they be thinking about their strategy in those early days of like, yeah, I've got a newsletter with like 5 people on it. How do I reach more people? Where should they start?
Yeah, I always want to encourage organizations, solopreneurs, wherever they are. Really with marketing, there is an element of, yes, quantity, right? The more people you're in front of, the higher chance you have of reaching a specific demographic or converting, etc. But really wanting to emphasize quality over quantity. You can have 5 people on your email list and still be really impactful and still be really high converting. You're really wanting to go back and lean on things like, what research have you done on your audience? What competitive research have you done? What business goals have you set for yourself, right? Making sure that especially early on or when you are lacking a lot of resources, that you're really staying focused with your marketing. So if you know there are 1 or 2 areas you specifically want to grow your organization, making sure that the marketing tactics you are implementing are are supporting those, and that you're staying uber focused and not getting distracted by all the other, million things that you could be doing with marketing, right? Making sure you're supporting the overall goal. So I think those are some of the big recommendations I would make.
And then for companies that have been in business for a while or nonprofits that have been around for a bit, what makes them more successful when they reach out for marketing support? Like what sort of things should they know ahead of time and bring to the table in order to have a good start?
Yeah, I think one thing that can be, I guess, undervalued is having set aside a budget already for marketing for yourself. You can find a lot of different numbers that people throw around on how much you maybe should spend on marketing. But I think a lot of that really comes down to whether or not you are actually invested and you're willing to invest in your organization. A lot of times when people say, well, I don't have a marketing budget set aside yet, like, or I'm looking for some guidance on how much to spend. A lot of times there's actually an underlying fear or reservation already, whether that be they've had a bad experience working with somebody who tried to push, a quick trick to boost engagement, or they're not entirely sold on the ROI themselves, whatever the case may be. I think there's usually kind of an underlying fear that kind of needs to be addressed first, and making sure that they're committed to marketing is a marathon, not a sprint. You're not just going to go out and run the race, after no practice or one day of running, you're not going to be a marathon runner. It really is an investment in your organization, and you may have things that can go viral. You may see some pretty short-term growth, but really the overall purpose and goal with your marketing strategy should be longevity and sustainability of your organization. So if you don't have business systems in place, organizational systems in place, that can also really hurt your marketing. So making sure that you are set up for the long haul.
So really being able to just understand that, yes, hey, this is a strategy for a long term where you need to be ready in order to invest in that. It's not just something that you're going to say, hey, I want to focus on it this month and then get back to my priorities next month. But how can we integrate this into our business so that it can help us be more successful?
Exactly. I think a lot of people they want that overnight success, or they want the virality, and there's nothing wrong with that per se. But, we've heard stories of something overnight goes viral, but if you didn't have things set up operationally or on the business side to begin with to, withstand hundreds of thousands of orders or, donations or whatever that looks like, there can be a lot of cracks on the back end that you weren't prepared to handle. So I think it's really important to make sure that you're actually ready for long-term growth.
Very cool. Do you have any case studies you could share of like what a marketing project looks like and how it's made an impact?
Sure, yeah. And we have additional case studies on these areas on our website too, if people are interested in checking them out. Some of the most successful marketing strategies that we've seen really are implementing a multi-channel approach. So they're not just focusing on email marketing or social media or any other number of marketing tactics. It's really ensuring that you are using all of them in a cohesive way that fits with your brand, that speaks directly to the audience you're tailoring. So just for example, we have a client that we worked with, and we integrated a marketing campaign for them that was, I'm trying to think how many channels we spanned. It was multiple email touch points. There was a LinkedIn social media component to it. We also even integrated a direct mail piece, which is not necessarily something to think about with digital marketing these days. But we were thinking through what are some creative ways to try to engage with their audience, meet them where they're at, and make sure that they were top of mind. And by integrating those various touch points across various channels, we're able to see an increase in their conversion rate. I believe it was double from when we started with just email. So just email, translating it from just email to a multi-channel approach doubled their conversion rate.
Fantastic. And I think there's almost something hidden behind that of like making sure that you're tracking some sort of engagement of how people are responding to what you're putting out there, so that you can measure how that can grow and really understand here's what that value is.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm a huge advocate for what's called A/B testing. And if you haven't heard the term, it's basically, setting up a campaign, say, for example, an email that you're going to send out, and you have two different versions to see what people interact with more. So I'm a big fan of that. We utilize that in that multi-channel campaign as well to make sure that the language that we're using, the timing that we're trying to communicate with people, that it's really effective. And if for some reason, we're seeing that one version is not working really well, we know really quickly because we have the analytics in place, and we have the tracking in place, we know really quickly that we can pivot and try something else to make sure that we're boosting those numbers.
A lot of the people I talk to are like really clueless when it comes to marketing. It's like, hey, I don't even know how to approach thinking about this. And so it's like, one, okay, start understanding that you need a long-term strategy. You need to understand what your goals are, how to communicate with them. And then from that, it sounds like, all right, here's how I'm going to start to measure my analytics of how people are responding to what I'm putting out there so that I can grow. When somebody comes to you and they say, hey, listen, I need some marketing support, what kind of things should they expect from working with a marketing company?
Yeah, and I think it really depends on who you're working with. When it comes to working with our organization, really we have kind of two approaches. Depending on where the organization's at, we do come in on a fractional level. So we will handle the marketing strategy piece, helping to identify what the most effective strategies, channels are, and then actually doing all of the creative, the copy, etc., to actually execute, track, and improve on those campaigns for clients. And then we also come in on more of instead of a done for you, more of like a done with you capacity. So for organizations that aren't fully ready to pass things off or don't have a high enough budget to pass off everything and are just looking for more support and working alongside an organization, we also offer that. So helping them to be able to understand and working with them together to craft the strategy, helping them to then take all of that knowledge and that research that we've compiled for them and helping them to be able to execute it themselves, create specific systems in place, and make sure that they have various tools embedded already in their organization to make sure that they are doing the tracking properly, that they are able to understand the numbers and not just see like, okay, we had, a 10% increase in our Instagram followers. Well, great. Well, why? Right. So helping them understand, the numbers that they have and kind of put a context and a rationale behind them. So kind of offering both areas of support.
I love that. How would a founder know when they're ready to hand off marketing to another company or to engage with another company in a marketing project?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that really comes down to a couple things. One is, like I mentioned earlier, just that marketing budget piece, knowing that it is a marathon and you are going to be investing time and resources. So I think one answer is just if you already have a budget that is set aside and you are able to do that, that would be one easy answer. But also just when it comes to your own knowledge, your own time, right? Everybody's time is valuable. Time is money, they say. And so if you are a business owner, if you are a nonprofit solopreneur, wherever you find yourself, where is your specific time most valuable, right? If marketing is not your expertise and you don't know how to interpret the numbers or how to specifically position yourself, instead, I would recommend, leaning into what you are good at and where you can help your own business and outsourcing those specific areas to make sure that you're spending your time wisely.
That's great advice for any entrepreneur. It's like, hey, understand where your time is best spent. And if there's another key activity that's not your strength, find somebody who can really take
Yeah,
that to the next level.
there's a fine line between working in your business and working on your business.
No, and that's a transition I think everyone goes through as they're building a business, getting to that stable point.
Absolutely.
Now, you've been in Nashville for a long time.
I have.
And really built that up there. Um, I've been very ingrained in the Columbus social enterprise ecosystem, but I'm curious what you've seen in that social impact scene in Nashville over the years.
So I, as of this recording, have been in Nashville going on 11 years, 11, maybe 12 years at this point. It kind of blows my mind that I've been here this long, but it's been fun to see it evolve from a couple of different perspectives. First as a student and then as a business owner and, being part of Nashville's business scene. When I first came to Nashville, I think most people still know Nashville today as a very creative music industry scene, and it absolutely is still that. But even in the past decade, it's really evolved, and there's a really large emphasis on healthcare, tech, and more recently, I would say just entrepreneurship in general and social entrepreneurship being part of that. I think I don't know the exact numbers off the top of my head, but I think like as of the past year or so, Nashville has over 60,000 businesses. They've been really investing into the entrepreneurship scene here. And I'm trying to help more Nashvillians to start businesses here and to grow their businesses here. So there have been a lot more resources popping up, entrepreneur centers, networking groups, and even a lot of universities here have kind of expanded their programs as well. I know 2 or 3 of them now have social. So it's been really cool to see the shift, not just in entrepreneurship in Nashville, but also the social impact side of things.
I love that it's finding its way into the universities where people are learning about it. I'm always surprised when I'm having a conversation and I recognize that social entrepreneurship is a weird term that not a lot of people have heard about. And it's like when I get outside my bubble and it's like, oh, okay, I have to explain what this is. I'm just go back to the basics of like, you know what goodwill is?
Yeah, we get so kind of wrapped up in our own worlds, we sometimes forget what people don't know about it because it's our language every day.
I love that. Now, I'm curious, like, what programs and support systems are emerging in Nashville? Like, have you had a sense of what people need in Nashville the most when they're getting off the ground?
There are definitely a lot of more like mentorship programs and accelerator programs that have popped up, both in Nashville and in some surrounding cities like Chattanooga and Knoxville. Even, we have here the Nashville Entrepreneur Center, and other kind of similar entrepreneur centers that are really trying to build up more of a network of entrepreneurs and social enterprises. And they're offering various classes, networking events to try to build more of an interconnectedness and a community around that. I'm really excited that Nashville has a chapter of the Social Enterprise Alliance. So that's been a great way to build up community here as well.
Fantastic. Awesome. Now back to main impact. When you think about your ideal client, like who's your ideal client? When should someone pick up the phone and be like, yes, I need your help?
Yeah, we work with values-driven, purpose-driven organizations, both for-profits and nonprofits. I really do believe that any organization can be a force for good and make a difference. And when we're all working together, like it builds up the entire community. So really wanting to help any organization that is really out there trying to be a change maker, trying to be a difference maker in their industry. We are more industry agnostic in that sense. If you are an organization that is looking for marketing clarity, you fall in that, that population where you need marketing, but you don't know what that means or how to actually use it effectively, or, what is going to be the best for your business growth, right? How to invest that. Would love to have a conversation. I would say that's a specialty of ours, helping to find clarity in marketing. Or if you are looking to take your organization to the next level, maybe that's through refreshing your brand and your website before you tackle the marketing strategy piece. Would also love to have a conversation.
Beautiful. I love that. What's your vision for 2026? Where do you see main impact going next?
Yeah, it's an exciting question, and we recently actually published our 2025 impact report. I was really excited about it. Even though we are not a certified B Corporation at the time, I still wanted to have sort of our own internal metrics of where are we now, where are we going, how can we track our own impact internally and in the community in various ways. And in that also touched on some different vision points for 2026, 3 kind of main categories that we are really looking into and considering for our own growth. The first is the idea of being a change maker and not a noise maker. So being very intentional with marketing and making sure that we are contributing to, to the internet, to the state of things, and not just kind of publishing for the sake of publishing. That's a really important thing to make sure that we are responsible and ethical in our marketing. The second is to educate on digital sustainability, which is a whole conversation in itself that I won't dive into, but I'm very passionate about how our online presence impacts the planet. And then the third being just supporting more purpose-driven brands. Really wanting to help elevate all of the community when it comes to that.
That's fantastic. What would you say your vision is for the world in these crazy times?
That is a very big question. I think it kind of goes along with even just the business vision. When I think about a vision for the world, I also hope that even just in like our small corner of the world in Nashville, Tennessee, and the organizations we work with, really hope that there are others that can also be pursuing purposeful marketing and purposeful content and purposeful content consumption, right? Whether you are on the the content creator or content consumer side. Just making sure that we are responsible in our consumption, and that we are all working in each of our own spheres of influence to make a difference in whatever way that looks. You don't just have to be, I think one of the things that I early on, recognize is that you don't have to be working for a nonprofit, right, to be making a difference. And we each have our own areas of work and life that we're able to bring a smile to someone's face and to make a difference. And I think it's really important that we all lean into that.
Well, do you have any cool ways that you've incorporated that into your own life? Any kind of neat little tips or insights on your own journey?
That's a great question. I think especially right now, for me, that looks like supporting local. So, I'm really grateful that Nashville has a lot of local and small businesses. And a lot of industry. So it's always fun to learn about new businesses that are growing and be able to go out and support these small businesses, knowing that they are our neighbors and they are people that we are doing life with on a day-to-day basis. So really trying to lean into whether that's local businesses in Nashville or just supporting small businesses in general across this US and the world. There's an organization called Little Blue Cart. I don't know if you're familiar with them. We recently joined their directory, but they are a whole platform specifically highlighting and focusing local and small businesses. So definitely recommend. I can send you the link to include in the show notes, but you can find various local businesses in every industry on that platform.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, and it sounds like that's also a great way to realize, hey, here's who I can help support on social media or share, with other people. Because I think when you communicate what exists in your own neighborhood, it's really powerful, especially when those small local businesses don't usually have as big of a marketing budget as big corporations or other big players.
Yeah. Everybody has something that they can do to make a difference. Even if, like you said, it's just supporting through social media, word of mouth marketing, any little way you can help.
Love that. So for a values-driven company, how can they reach out to you, connect with you, figure out what's going on in your world?
So our website is a great resource. maineimpact.com. My email is just hello@maineimpact.com. You can also follow us on social media @maineimpact. So Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn. Feel free to follow us. We share content pretty regularly on, value-driven marketing and how to use your business as a force for good.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a real pleasure just learning a little bit more about marketing, especially for people who are new to outsourcing that and finding out what do I need for my organization.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Adam.
And if you're listening, I hope you enjoyed this episode. You can find more information on the show notes. And I look forward to sharing another story in our next episode.